on the money, so you got to hit it a little bit at it or a little bit beyond it. But you would say, oh boy, look, a reboiler, 1, 2, 3, 4 stages, a feed stage, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stages, and an equilibrium partial condenser will do the job. You finish at about 4:45. You put it on the boss's desk. You get on the bus for home. You sit down next to the guy on the bus, of course. He says, what'd you learn today? You said, oh man, I just designed a distillation column for the boss, and he's going to be thrilled with it. And the guy on the bus says, well, what'd you do? You tell him. He says, that's baloney. The boss is going to fire you tomorrow when you go to work. You say, how can he do that? I've been so careful with this. So he says, you know, you can get away with fewer stages than that. Why does the boss want to build all those stages? So you say, hey, boy, I better get to work a half hour early and get this fixed up. So you run in, grab it off the boss's desk, and don't get caught. And so you say, okay, again, can we make use of this stuff? No, I might as well draw another one. And the guy on the bus even is so kind as to tell you that you put the feed in too soon. So you say, yeah, I must have done that. So you come over here and you say, well, here we go. Now, yeah, I get more space here than I had last time, so let's just ignore that problem. You say, man, oh, I better put the feed in. And you stick that back on the boss's desk. Fortunately, the boss is sick that day. You get on the bus, the man on the bus is there, of course. You tell him, yeah, I put the feed in too soon. Here, I've redone it. He's going to be thrilled. The guy on the bus says, well, what'd you do? And you tell him, he says, well, you dumbbell. You've now put it in too late. So this is a Goldilocks problem. We'll put it in just right. Because we have a choice in this kind of a problem. We can put the feed in so we have the fewest stages to do the job. So we go, maybe we decide the place to put this thing in is right here. Yep. And that's at that, and all the conditions given, I've now got a feed location that requires fewer stages than I had before, and either the other two, even though it may or may not look like it because the diagrams aren't exactly the same. So that's a standard. So this is the solution to the basic standard problem. Solution to the basic standard problem. And we're going to use this pattern of thought to do a lot more problems, but yeah.
So the Goldilocks point is a saturated vapor line?
I didn't hear that. Try it again.
The Goldilocks point is a saturated vapor line?
No, I've not changed any of that. I've tried the same feed line in every case, hopefully. So I've drawn every one of these pictures for cold feed. I've drawn the line the same. Only thing I've done, and I've used the same material balance. So look, what's the same in these three diagrams? Equilibrium curve hasn't changed, number one. The material balance on the top hasn't changed, number two. Material balance in the bottom hasn't changed, number three. What I've done is I've made different choices of the feed plate. And here I made a choice that allowed me to advance as much as I could everywhere, avoiding plates like these that don't do much, or points like these that don't do much. So I've sort of avoided having a series of plates in my column that aren't doing anything, well, as best I can, by putting the feed in what I consider to be the best place for these pictures. So that's the standard basic problem. And we'll do a lot of variations on the theme, but we need to understand how this calculation goes. So, like with every calculation, there's lots of remarks that can be made. So let's make a couple of remarks. Here's one remark. Okay, remark number one. You're looking at a V, which is R plus 1D. And D has been fixed because of problem working. So the bigger R, the bigger V. And the bigger V, as V goes up, V prime goes up. So as I make R go up, V goes up, V prime goes up, I'm boiling off more and more. I might say to myself, by increasing R, do I help myself any? I'm clearly hurting myself by having to boil up more and having to condense more. And the answer is, yeah, you can see that if I ran a different R, I would get a different answer. And we can illustrate that fairly directly on this diagram. So if you're controlling one of these columns, you kind of have an idea what would happen if you change the reflux ratio. So I might have a feed here, a feed line there. I'm trying to make this, I set an R, and I draw this, and you come along and say, oh, increase R a little. So that doesn't change this construction line, but if I increase R, the slope of the line is R over R plus 1. This line gets more slope. So as I increase R, I get something like that, and I have the same equilibrium curve I had before. So now, at the previous R, I was making steps of a certain size. At the new R, I'm making a much larger advance each time, so I'm going to take much fewer stages. So N is going to go down. Now, whether you like the trade-off of building fewer stages and running more heat, well, that's something to be decided. If I want to know what's the least N to do the job, the least N is obtained by making R go very large, and R over R plus 1 goes to 1. And so the least number of stages to do the job would correspond to a picture that looks like this. That's the least. Any number of stages below that cannot make the job. So that's one thing that we can talk about. Another thing we can talk about is, well, you know, maybe what I ought to do is decrease R. So R goes down. I want to know what the number of stages does. So we'll find when we draw the picture that N goes up. And sooner or later, we get a picture that looks something like this. Okay, here I am. Here is an R. Here is the bottom. I'm running a certain R. I get a certain number of stages. Now I reduce R, and here's my feed line. So right there, right here, substantially more stages. Finally, I get to an R that looks something like that. Let me draw it bigger over here. Finally, I get to an R that looks something like that. And here it is. So here I am. That looked like an operable R. That looks like an operable R. That looks like just barely an operable R. So the slope of this line right here is R over R plus 1 at R least. And that, of course, takes infinitely many stages because you get hung up in this pinch right here. So I can decrease R, N goes up, I hit R least, and what we say about R least is something like this. At R least, N is infinity. At any R below R least, you can't even do the job. So we've now introduced the idea of R, of the least number of stages at R going to infinity, and the greatest number of stages, namely infinite, at R becoming R least. There's a lot of significance to R least. One of them is that many companies, when they're designing distillation columns, have economic rules of thumb that R ought to be a certain multiple of R least, depending upon the prevailing economics. So many designs will be specified as R equals 1.5 times the minimum R. So we're beginning to get pretty much a lot of this done. There's still some things to do. What time you guys got?
5.
We're out of here, in other words. All right. Okay, we're going to continue with this, and in another period or so, we'll have a complete